weekend. Glorious weather today, far cry from what we've had during the week because there's been torrential rain. The teams were here for 2 days of regulation testing in the week. They got pretty little relevant mileage in because the rain was of biblical proportions. But yesterday for qualifying and today for race one, there's barely a cloud in the sky. It's nice and warm, and the team's getting ready for 33 minutes plus 1 lap of racing. David Addison trackside, and the man on pole position, his first F3 pole, is Jehan Daruvala. He drives for Carlin, as does second and third drivers on the grid, Lando Norris and Jake Dennis, with then Callum Ilott, the Brit for Prema this year, starting fourth ahead of another Carlin driver, Ferdinand Habsburg, and it is the championship leader sixth on the grid, Joel Eriksson. At the back is Harrison Newey, who had an off yesterday in qualifying. He was off at the Lesmo Benz, and only 20 minutes of qualifying as well, so limited time. He wasn't able to go back out, so he didn't do a time within 107%. The stewards have said, yep, it's okay, you can start. And the current MRF Challenge champion is going to be one to watch, I think, coming up from the rear of the grid, because although people will tell you that you can't overtake in Formula 3, you can at Monza, you can at Spa, amongst other places, and Silverstone as well, because it's a nice, fast, wide circuit, and then you can slipstream, and we always have spectacular racing here. Monza tends to pop on and off the F3 European Championship calendar, so last here was 2015, where all 3 races fell to Felix Rosenqvist, who is here with his Prema driver coach hat on. The fans getting ready down at the Variante Ascari as the pole position car is still awaited. Jehan Daruvala, who was on pole here a couple of years ago in Formula Renault, but now celebrating his first Formula 3 pole. Lando Norris, you caught a glimpse of there for Carlin, lining up on the inside of the staggered 1x1 grid with that long run down towards the Rettifilo, the first chicane. There to the front comes Force India junior driver Jehan Daruvala. As I say, he's raced here in Formula Renault and now moving up into Formula 3, but he was quick in karting to begin with. He's raced in the Toyota Racing Series in New Zealand as well, another of the winter single-seater championships that attracts the young drivers to keep their hands in and gain more experience during the winter. Can he convert pole into a win? Well, an awful lot of that is going to be based around the slipstreaming. If you can make a break, then it might just pay dividends, but we'll see. There is Lando Norris then, the young British driver, former Ginetta Junior star, last year the Formula Renault NEC and Formula Renault Euro Cup champion. He's been a race winner in both Italian and German F4. He was the MSA Formula 4 champion as well. And of course the current BRDC McLaren Autosport Young Driver of the Year award winner. And like a lot of drivers, not just here, but racing globally, he's carrying stickers with Forza Billy or Billy Whiz, raising support for British driver Billy Munger, who was injured at Donington a couple of weeks ago. Jake Dennis, here last week, driving in an Audi in the Blancpain GT Series Endurance Cup, now in Formula 3, and he was a driver that attracted the attention of the stewards because there's a regulation in this championship. You can't race at the venue within 30 days of a round of the championship. Well, clearly, if he was racing here last week, then that contravenes that regulation. However, in fairness, as you look at Callum Ilott, the GT programme is Jake's main commitment. He's only doing a handful of F3 races, and he was signed up well within that 30 days, so it was virtually impossible that he wasn't going to be able to not break that regulation. The team was fined fiscally yesterday, rather than Jake, but another driver that was fined was Pedro Piquet, because he too took part last week here in the Lamborghini Super Trofeo free practice session. And again, by getting mileage, the stewards clamped down on that as well. In fairness to Piquet, he did bail out of the rest of the weekend when Van Amersfoort alerted him to the fact that he shouldn't be doing it, but he had still contravened a regulation. So it was a monetary fine and also sitting out some of free practice yesterday that was the punishment for Pedro Piquet. It doesn't affect things for this grid. You see in Ferdinand Habsburg, who lines up 5th, and 6th there is the championship leader, Joel Eriksson. He's had a win, of course, so has Callum Ilott, so Lando Norris. So you've got the 3 drivers, one behind the other, who've all done the winning this year. 3 different winners at Silverstone last time out. From Monza, the championship goes to the streets of Po, a very different sort of circuit for the next races in the championship. Continuing our walk down the grid, on the next rank comes Guanyu Zhao, the Chinese driver with Prema, second year in Formula 3. And Guanyu Zhao should be one to watch, I would have thought, over the course of this race, because he has got the experience not only of racing these cars, but also of this circuit, because he was the runner-up 2 years ago in the Italian F4 Championship. The champion of that, Ralph Aaron, is on the grid a bit further back. There is Jake Hughes, another of the quick Brits. with his BRDC Superstars badge on the side of the car. Jake, former Formula Renault gun and GP3 racer, came out of the BRDC's Formula 4 championship He was the first champion of that, and he drives for High-Tech. Mick Schumacher, moving from F4, in which he's had a couple of seasons, into F3 this year. He was another driving in the MRF Challenge over the winter months. Mick for Prema, for whom he drove in F4 last year. He was at Van Amersfoort in F4 in his first season, and that was his big rival, Joey Mawson, who was last year's German F4 champion. He stays with Fritz Van Amersfoort's team. He lost out Harrison Newey at the very last knockings of the MRF Challenge in the winter. But the Australian driver will be one to watch, experienced team, but he's still learning about some of the circuits, and he's still learning about the extra speed and downforce that an F3 car has. So Joey Mawson starts 10th on the grid. 11th is where you find Nikita Mazepin, who has also graduated from Formula Renault through the Toyota Racing Series into FIA Formula 3 this year, but he did have an outing, and I think I'm right in saying a race win, at Snetterton last year in the BRDC's F3 Championship, the MSV run category for the non-FIA spec cars, different type of car, but with the F3 badge, and he was quick there. 33 is Marino Sato, who went pretty well in testing during the week, and the Japanese driver in his first season in Formula 3 is another driver that should know the circuit, because he's come out of Italian F4, and Marino Sato then driving for Motor Park, one of the rookies. Pedro Piquet is a second-year driver, having been a former double Brazilian F3 champion. 19th he was in this championship last year, and staying with Van Amersfoort, different livery. The pseudo Parmalat colours he carried last year have gone for the rather more corporate orange and black of VAR. And Pedro Piquet then lining up 13th on the grid. Now 14th is a man with work to do. Maximilian Günther, who some people think should be the champion because he was second last year, he was 8th the year before. In other words, he's hugely experienced. He's been a race winner. He's had 5 career victories in FIA Formula 3, but he didn't get a toe yesterday, and so dropped down the order. The next driver on the grid is Tadasuke Makino, another of the High-Tech fleet of drivers, and Makino new to the championship this year, but he knows about Formula 3 because he was 5th in the Japanese championship last season. So he is good to go. Then it will be Ralph Aaron there, the Estonian, second-year driver. He was a race winner last season, only once, but he did have a win. But the Italian F4 champion of 2 years ago didn't really get hooked up in qualifying yesterday. It's so important to get a toe round here, and he didn't. And so he's ended up a long way back on the grid. Like Günther, he's got work to do. Günther 14th, 16th is Ralph Aaron. And then the back of the grid, just to finish it off, there's Kevin Suri, who had an engine change, so he gets a 10-place grid drop that was near the back anyway. So also David Beckman, who will start 18th, he had an engine change. And then there's Harrison Newey at the very, very back after his off yesterday, and it was a very slow lap time. So Jehan Daruvala starts on pole position from Lando Norris and Jake Dennis. It's Callum Isle at 4th, ahead of Ferdinand Habsburg. Joel Eriksson 6th on the grid from Guan Yu Zhao, then Jake Hughes, Mick Schumacher and Joey Mawson to round out the top 10 on the grid, as the grid is now being cleared and the 1-minute border has been given, so the engines fire up. Nikita Mazepin is 11th, ahead of Marino Sato and Pedro Piquet. Maximilian Günther, one to watch. Tadasuke Makino is 15th, ahead of Ralph Aaron. He's another to watch. Then there's Kevin Suri, David Beckman, who, when he came into the championship last year for Nooker, was pretty competitive, so it's a shame that he's a long way back on this grid. And then Harrison Newey, who actually proved in that MRF Challenge, the Indian-based single-seater 2-litre championship, that he was a very good racer, was very determined and had good racecraft and did a fair amount of overtaking. So Harrison Newey, I think, could be a dark horse. Not for a win, but to make good progress, that's for sure. So, 33 minutes plus a lap. The drivers will be released onto the final warming up lap very shortly. This championship with 10 weekends, 30 races, 2 street circuits, 5 Grand Prix venues. They get free practice, they get 2 qualifying sessions, the second of which is to come this afternoon, and that gives you 2 lap times for races 2 and 3. You've only got 4 sets of Hankook tyres, though, across the qualifying of the races, so you have to manage how you're going to use those. Sometimes, as you get to the third race, drivers will have 2 new and 2 used tyres to try and keep some fresh rubber, but they don't want to not use that for qualifying because that is so important. So the field released, the cars working their way down towards the first chicane, Loreto Filho, which is always a pinch point on this lap. They turn right, then left, sprint up towards the Curva Grande, speed building all the time, and then work their way up towards the Variante della Roggia, the second chicane. Another potential overtaking opportunity, and this lap is the chance to get the warmth into the Hankook rubber. Having gone through that grid and talked about engine changes and the like, there's also another factor to bear in mind for people's grid positions, and that is the dreaded track limits abuse. Now, the race director clamped down on it in qualifying, so amongst those that lost a lap time were Maximilian Günther, Ralph Aaron, Harrison Newey, David Beckman and Joey Mawson. So by running wide at not actually the same place, but the fences at different places for different drivers, if they abused the track limits and gained out of doing it, then that lap time was deleted. So that was another reason why one or two drivers found themselves a little bit further down the pecking order. But it's going to lend itself to a good race, that is for sure. The cars work their way now down towards the Variante Ascari, through the Curva del Saraglio, and then it's into that left-right-left flick. It's a very quick chicane, and then the speed builds out of the Variante Ascari down towards the Parabolica, the long, long right that loops them round back towards the start and finish line, and of course then they will slot into place in that one-by-one staggered grid. Monza is one of a number of circuits where the start line is further down the pit straight. The timing line is as you come out of Parabolica, but the start is halfway down that pit straight, so that all of the grid are out of the last corner. And it is Jehan Daruvala, former schoolmate of Callum Islets, who is going to line up a row behind him on the grid, who leads the round down towards the completion of this formation lap. The Hankook rubber now hopefully up to temperature, and we'll see who the brave drivers are and who the quick starters are, with that run to the first chicane being all important. So the Force India junior driver for Carlin, Jehan Daruvala, works the tyres, brings the field now up through the Parabolica, up towards the grid. Monza 2015 was a rather spectacular weekend, with races having stoppages. There was the infamous Antonio Giovinazzi, Lance Stroll coming together. There were half points awarded and races not going the full distance because there wasn't time, and it was perhaps the meeting where driving standards were looked at most. It wasn't just those two drivers that were in the wars, there were lots and lots of others, and it was felt that driving standards needed looking at. Last year F3 wasn't on the calendar, but it has always been a place that's delivered action-packed racing. Fingers crossed for more of the same. The last few cars then are about to slot into place. As soon as Harrison Newey for VAR is in at the back of the grid, then we'll have the indication given that we are good to go. The officials on the start gantry will have the 5-second board and then control the lights. Harrison Newey slots into place. The circuit vehicles form up, including the Alpha 156 chase car. The green flag shown. The drivers then will look towards the lights, Formula 1 style, so it's 5 lights on when the lights go out. Now we're racing. Lando Norris bogs down a little bit, and up past him gets Jake Dennis, and from the other side of the grid Callum Islet goes around him as well. There's one car that has completely failed to get away and does so now as the cars accelerate their way down towards the Rettifilo for the first time. Daruvala leads but locks up. They scrabble their way through the chicane and now sprint up towards the Curva Grande for the first time. So Daruvala it was leading the pack, and he's hanging onto that advantage as they work their way through for the first time. It looks like Jake Dennis has gone second, one of the more experienced F3 drivers. Jake having been third in the championship 2 years ago, back after a season in GP3, and they work their way now up towards the Variante della Roggia, with Callum Islet going up the inside and Lando Norris missing out the chicane altogether. He was on the outside line, ran out of road, elects to go up the escape road. Now where's he going to blend back in? He's going to be fourth, still ahead of Islet. They work their way into the first of the two Lesmo bends then. As they do so, race leader Daruvala trying to get away, but it's all shuffled behind him then. Now Lando Norris with that little trip up the escape road has dropped back. Jake Dennis then runs second. Ferdinand Habsburg is third. Norris fourth. Fifth is Islet. The cars sprinting their way down toward the Variante Ascari with side-by-side Joey Mawson and his teammate Pedro Piquet there further back in the pack as they break for the chicane now. Joey Mawson falling away, and there's somebody that's run wide and kicked up the dirt and gets back on again. There's all sorts of strife at the chicane. Jake Hughes, I think it was, that ran wide because he's dropped back in the pack as well now as the cars work their way down to the Parabolica for the first time. Daruvala leads Dennis, but they two teammates with a tight gap between them. There's another lock-up from Lando Norris, bit scrappy, and he's gone wide again, looking to the Parabolica. He sorts himself out more or less, but that now is going to leave him easy prey because the traffic stacks up behind as they come over the line. Daruvala leads Dennis, third is Habsburg, 4th is Norris, 5th there it is Callum Ilott, in 6th place through Joel Eriksson. Mick Schumacher is next. He tries to get himself up alongside the championship leader as they go down towards the chicane. Lando Norris up the inside of Habsburg, and he goes through. Accelerates his way then through the chicane. So at the end of the opening lap, it was half a second between the top two. Johan Daravala to Jake Dennis. Ferdinand Habsburg doing a great job as well as there. Look, the championship leader, number 1, which is Joel Eriksson, coming under huge attack as they work their way up towards the Rogia chicane. Jake Dennis trying to find a way past his teammate. Lando Norris then up into 3rd. Is he in the background? Yes, he's got past the Austrian. So Habsburg drops to 4th. 5th is Ilott. 6th is Eriksson. 7th is Schumacher. In 8th place as they came over the line was Guan Yu Zhao. In 9th place was Piquet, and Joey Mawson was rounding out the top 10. But wide in the background there, Joel Eriksson, I fear, he got away with that, but a little bit of time lost as the 3 leaders now work their way down towards the Variante Ascari, with Lando Norris coming back at Jake Dennis. Now, Jake not here for the whole championship season, so how much of a defence would he put up to Lando Norris? But Jake here to help Carlin with his experience, to help the other drivers as well with his experience. He will do Poe and then sit out a few weekends. Battle raging on at the rear of the pack as well, as through there goes 17, Harrison Newey, who actually is not, surprisingly, making the progress anticipated. Mick Schumacher under attack as they work their way now down towards the Parabolica. It's got Guan Yu Zhao up behind him there. Look, number 8, as they turn their way through that long right-hander. Schumacher goes a little bit wide, and now the race leaders sprint their way up over the timing line. It is still Johan Daravala leading the way. Last time the gap was half a second, and getting a toe as they come past the pits this time is Jake Dennis, so the 2 leaders much, much closer. Dennis goes to the outside line as they head down towards the Rettifilio. He's got his nose in front, he goes round the outside, does he? No, he runs off the road, he didn't have the track space. Lando Norris arrives right on the back of Daravala, so Jake Dennis comes out ahead. He's going to have to give the place back, I would have thought, but he can't really slot in ahead of Lando Norris, so up the inside goes Daravala. Norris is going to get through as well, although Jake Dennis tries to brave it out with him on the outside line there, wheel to wheel. The 3 Carlin cars absolutely as one. Something's going to give potentially up at the next chicane. Lando Norris on the outside line goes ahead of Jake Dennis up into 2nd place. It's a Carlin 1, 2, 3, 4, isn't it? Because as they come through, you've got Daravala leading the way. 2nd is Lando Norris for Carlin. 3rd then, Jake Dennis. And 4th for Carlin, Ferdinand Habsburg, going much better than he did at Silverstone. The best that he came away with there was a couple of 12th places, but Habsburg here, coached by and related to Jamie Campbell-Walter, GT champion. He runs 4th. Callum Ilott 5th, not making progress yet. Joel Eriksson is 6th, and then a gap has opened up, in fact, so it's a leading queue of 6 cars. Callum Ilott, by the way, has done the fastest lap of the race as they work their way down to the Variante Ascari, and he had a look on the inside there. We're getting warnings about respecting track limits. Quirkily, the driver being warned is in number 69. There is not a number 69 on the entry list. So somebody somewhere needs, correction, it now says 96, which is Joey Mawson, must respect track limits. The 3 leading cars now being caught again by Ferdinand Habsburg as they get to the Parabolica, because he got a toe there in the straight line. But in turn, Habsburg is taking Ilott and Eriksson with him as they work their way now up past the pits. So the race order remains Johan Daravala ahead, but now Lando Norris is 0.491 of a second back, and up to challenge comes Callum Ilott on the outside of Ferdinand Habsburg as they make the run down towards the chicane. This is for 4th, and Ilott goes through. Callum Ilott then finally breaks through all of that Carlin traffic. Next in the battle, remember you get points in the top 10, and that's rounded out at the moment by Joey Mawson. He's got Nikita Mazepin tucked up behind him, but as the leaders work their way through, another challenge comes on the inside there to try and retake the 4th place. Ferdinand Habsburg gets up the inside of Callum Ilott, who will have the inside line for the Variante Rogia. They break now, side by side. Habsburg comes round the outside. He's got the place back, fantastic, but Ilott tries to get the undercut. Goes to the inside line, Habsburg squeezes him. There's just about racing room, and trying to buy into it as well as Joel Eriksson. Ilott on the inside line will get the place back. Fantastic stuff. And what about Eriksson? Championship leader crawling all over the back of Ferdinand Habsburg in the blue Carlin car. Can't do it at the 2nd Lesbo bend. Has to slot back in behind. Great racing. Callum Ilott, 1 up, 1 down, and 1 up again. Habsburg now has to defend, because on his tail as they work their way to the Variante Ascari is Joel Eriksson, who needs to make progress here because he's giving away points to his rivals in the championship, Lando Norris particularly, and Callum Ilott. Now there, you've got 96 Joey Mawson ahead of us sideways, Pedro Piquet. There's Mazepin and Ralph Aaron at the back of that little gaggle as well. That is the fight for 9th and 10th, 11th and 12th. And the beneficiary is going to be Ralph Aaron because he got a good run coming out and a very, very forceful Ferdinand Habsburg there, trying to keep Joel Eriksson at bay as he goes one side and then the other. Mazepin on the back of Piquet, Mawson up the inside, Aaron goes up the inside. Mazepin is the loser out of all of that because his high-tech car goes wide and falls to the back of the queue. Ralph Aaron gets a tow coming off the Parabolica now. Ralph Aaron, the Estonian driver, not quite level up on the inside line, but thinking about it as he makes that move on the run now down towards the first chicane. Into the Rettifilia they go, and it is Jehan Daruvala leading the way. Still, the gap has gone up a little bit now, 0.6 of a second. Another one being warned about track limits is Mazepin, perhaps not surprisingly, as there you've got Schumacher ahead of Guan Yu Zhao for 7th and 8th places, and Zhao tries to fight back on the inside as now Jake Dennis comes up to attack Lando Norris and goes back through for 2nd place. Jake Dennis goes through. And Ralph Aaron losing out to Joey Mawson as they scrabble their way for the Variante della Roggia. Where to look next because there's battling going on just about everywhere. More forceful defence from Harrison Newey to make sure that the motorpark car of Kim Suri stays behind him. Through Lesmo 1, short straight Lesmo 2 comes next. 17 is Harrison Newey. Next target for him is going to be David Beckman. So all of this going on for 14th with Jake Hughes just up the road ahead of them after being delayed earlier. Up front though, Jehan Daruvala now getting away, and what's happened behind, because up to 3rd has come Callum Ilott, so Lando Norris has dropped back into 4th, and with all of that squabbling over the last lap, so the lead gap has widened. Daruvala on his own into the Parabolica. A lap ago it was, what, 6 in a line? Now it's rather broken up, and so Daruvala leads the way. They work their way through the Parabolica as you look back at Ralph Aaron, striving to work his way into and then up the top 10. But Daruvala could be not only a first-time winner in Formula 3, he could be the 4th different winner in 4 races as the leaders go by. Jake Dennis 2nd, now trying to defend from Callum Ilott, who keeps on coming on the outside line. The 2 Brits go wheel to wheel. Jake Dennis will have the place on the inside. Jake Dennis back through, and onto the grass goes Nikita Mazepin as Ralph Aaron gets through. Mazepin goes off the road and back on again, gives the place back to Ralph Aaron. Callum Ilott now desperately trying to find a way back ahead of Jake Dennis. The 2 of them run together as they fight it out up towards the Roggia chicane. Back on the inside, Jake Dennis claims the place. Callum Ilott has to slot back in behind him. But all of this, and Lando Norris now back in the mix as well, is playing right into the hands of the race leader because Daruvala is getting away. Norris up the inside of Ilott goes 3rd. Daruvala leads, Jake Dennis is 2nd, Lando Norris now 3rd. 4th again in this snakes and ladders race for some of them is Callum Ilott, and 5th is Joel Eriksson, who might yet, given the way things are panning out, with 23 minutes on the clock, get himself onto the podium. Here he comes against Ilott now. Down to the Variante Ascari. On the inside line is Ilott, but round the outside goes Joel Eriksson. That puts him 4th now. Motorpark goes ahead of Prema. It's now up to Joel Eriksson to see what he can do about the Carlin fleet ahead of him. Back markers come through the Variante Ascari. Ferdinand Habsburg is the one on the inside there, challenging Callum Ilott to no avail. The Austrian driver slots back in behind as they work their way up through the Parabolica over the timing line now. Habsburg again tries to get a run off the Parabolica, trying to use that slipstream to his effect. Callum Ilott goes through, then having dropped back into 5th place. Habsburg was 0.05 of a second behind him. And now Callum Ilott tries to break the toe, but that leaves the door open on the outside line, and Ferdinand Habsburg comes up alongside. They're wheel to wheel into the chicane, and through goes Ferdinand Habsburg. Ilott tries to fight back, coming out of the Rettifilia. That'll be the outside line up towards the Curva Grande. Is he going to be able to sit there all the way through and keep on challenging up towards the chicane? No. He has to slot back in. Now, can he dive out at the last moment? No. Habsburg moves across, and here comes Schumacher with the yellow helmet up the inside. There's a lock-up as Jake Dennis this time goes straight on at the Variante Roggia. And was there contact there? Not quite, but it was close between Habsburg and Ilott. Now Callum has to go defensive. He's falling back in the pack as Schumacher gets up with him. There's Guan Yu Zhao there as well. All of the Prema cars squabbling amongst themselves. Lando Norris then up ahead of Jake Dennis, who's down to 3rd. It's still Joel Eriksson in 4th place as they turn their way down towards the Variante Ascari. for the 7th time, and Pedro Piquet, incidentally, possibly with a toe, has just done the absolute best of anybody in the first sector of the entire race, as he, now 9th, tries to close on the Prema cars ahead of him. Daruvala, though, has done the absolute best in the middle sector on this lap as he builds the advantage. It was over 2 seconds last time. And the cars flick their way through the chicane, now back onto the straight that takes you down towards the Parabolica. Jehan Daruvala getting away from the rest of them. Norris 2nd, Dennis 3rd, and there, bouncing all over the grass, is David Beckman. The Monza Rally show is not normally until December, but David Beckman started early. He's back on and makes the run down now towards the Parabolica. Trying to work out what damage he's done. I think that's also put him into last place. Yes, it has, because Tadasuke Makino has gone ahead of him, and so too there is Kevin Suri up on the inside line. So David Beckman falls to the rear of the pack. That battle then is for anti-penultimate place. And there, Jake Dennis, and wheel-to-wheel with him, Joel Eriksson for 3rd, and Eriksson goes through on the inside. The Swedish driver picks up the place, and Jake Dennis is also now being warned about respecting track limits. Pedro Piquet comes out of the Rettifilio on the tail of Guan Yu Zhao. Jake Dennis back to the inside to try and retake the place away from Eriksson now. Side by side they run up towards the Variante della Roggia. And back ahead goes Jake Dennis with Ferdinand Habsburg closing that gap as well. And there, Callum Islet just being able to keep Mick Schumacher at bay. Next on the track limit monitor is Maximilian Günther, and drama in the background. That's Piquet, who's got himself on the curb. He might be able to rejoin from there. Günther 12th, being warned about track limits. Not making the progress, is he, from 14th on the grid, but he's attracted the attention of the officials by going wide. Pedro Piquet, with that moment you saw in the background, will drop way down the order. He was 9th. That finally brings Ralph Aaron into the points. There he is, ahead now of Maximilian Günther. Fastest lap of the race, by the way, is Lando Norris, 2nd. The gap, 2.4 seconds. He's hustling on in his pursuit of Jehan Daruvala, and he's done another absolute best in the middle sector, getting a replay of the start. Field accelerates down towards the first chicane, and a little bit of a lock-up, but Jehan Daruvala was just able to scrabble his way through the chicane and take the advantage. The one that bogged down on the grid was Marino Sato. That was Jake Hughes getting it wrong at the Variante Ascari, putting himself into striking distance of Maximilian Günther. And for some, there just was not room. This was the move that Jake Dennis pulled on Daruvala for the race lead. Ran out of road, skipped over the curb, got himself back onto the circuit, but gave the place back, quite rightly, to Daruvala, and then carried on the battle with Lando Norris. Incidentally, Pedro Piquet's spin that we caught the back end of was partly to do with Joey Mawson, because an incident between those two is being looked at by the officials. That was David Beckman's rally crossing at the Variante Ascari. Wow! A bad air day, that, I think, as he went very airborne indeed. Crash lands back to earth, rattles his fillings, and carries on, albeit somewhat chastened. Now, Jake Dennis has lost out there to his teammate Ferdinand Habsburg. The two blue Carlin cars running together. And out of all of this, where is Joel Eriksson? He was trying to get away up the road. So there is Lando Norris running 2nd. 3rd, the one non-Carlin driver up at the pointy end of the field now is Joel Eriksson. And then behind him, you've got Habsburg ahead of 21, Jake Dennis. Down they come towards the braking area for the chicane. The race officials confirming that they're having a look at that accident, the incident between Mawson and Piquet. So Jehan Daruvala is the race leader, as he has been for almost the entirety of the race. Lando Norris 2nd, fastest lap to his credit, a 1:44.4. The lap record here is a 1:44.0 set by Charles Leclerc 2 years ago. And wide there, coming out of the Parabolica, Lando Norris trying to keep at bay Mick Schumacher. The leader goes through, the gap's coming down, because last time it was down by a couple of tenths. So Lando Norris is closing on Daruvala, and he's still got 17 minutes in which to do this. The race leaders break for the chicane. In 3rd is Joel Eriksson. Is he close enough to Norris to benefit from a toe? There, up the inside, Callum Islet staves off the challenge of Schumacher. Ralph Aaron versus Maximilian Günther. Aaron on the inside, Günther on the outside, and Ralph Aaron stays ahead for 9th place as they wriggle their way through the chicane. Joey Mawson is being given a drive-through penalty. Number 96, Joey Mawson. You'll see the black and orange Van Amersfoort racing car. It is in 11th place, but Joey Mawson will get a drive-through for the incident with Piquet if he gets that far. Being squeezed towards the grass, as off the road goes Mick Schumacher now. works his way back onto the road and rejoins behind Callum Island. So nothing gained out of all of that. At the back of that group is Mawson. He's just fallen back behind Jake Hughes anyway. So a couple of places lost, and worse is to come. It's causing a collision. There on the screen is the race control message. Drive-through penalty to number 96, and reason causing a collision is the other part of the message. Ralph Aaron through then, keeping at bay Maximilian Gunter, and very wide in the background goes the charging PK, trying to make up for the lost time earlier on. Aaron down to the Ascari chicane, tucked up behind him is Maximilian Gunter. And the Estonian, Ralph Aaron, mentored by Marco Asma, former British Formula 3 champion, works his way down to the Parabolica. There, number 1 is Joel Eriksson. Barring a safety car, I would suggest he's too far back now to be any sort of a threat, even with 15 minutes to go. But the one that might do something is Lando Norris, because he's quicker than the race leader now. The lock-up going into the Parabolica down in that 13th place group. There, number 5, Pedro Piquet, fighting back. He's got himself up once more ahead of Marino Sato. And the race leaders head over the timing line with the gap down to 1.5 seconds. So half a second pull back on that lap by Lando Norris. And of course, he chips away like this, sooner or later he's going to be close enough for the toe to do the work for him. Aaron on the inside, keeping at bay still Maximilian Gunter. Another track limit warning for Mick Schumacher. And with 15 minutes on the clock, the race leaders now work lap 11. Nose to tail, Ralph Aaron. Maximilian Gunter to the inside line out of the Curva Grande. That's the outside line for the first part of the Variante de la Roggia, unless he can go through. There, look, Schumacher ahead of Guan Yu Zhao, 7th and 8th. They run, whoop, way out of line there. Callum Islet, but he's back on track and he stays ahead. Harrison Newey also being warned about track limits. I think Islet might well get a finger wagging for that as well. He's not the first one to have gone up the escape road, in fairness. So he hustles on in his pursuit of Jake Dennis, now 5th, having briefly led for a corner. Number 8, Guan Yu Zhao, goes through, close enough to make a move against Schumacher. And what about the gap between the race leaders? It was down in sector 1, it had crept up fractionally in sector 2. But Lando Norris, 1.5 seconds back, looking for a second win of the year, closing onto the back of Jehan Daruvala. It's great to see Carlin going so well, because it didn't, as a team, have all that much fortune last year relative to Prema. But a great start to the season. 3 different winners, of course, at Silverstone, but 3 different teams as well. Motorpark, Carlin and Prema. And Jehan Daruvala leading teammate Lando Norris as they work their way up over the timing line. Carlin 1-2, Motorpark 3, the gap down to 1.2 seconds. Norris is almost there now. Not only that, he's got 13 minutes in which to try and find a way through. So the race leaders go into the chicane, the first chicane, the Rettifilio for the 12th time. That's Callum Islet on the back of Jake Dennis now, striving to find a way past him, still to no avail. Nikita Mazepin, number 99, behind Ralph Aaron, which means he has fallen back behind Maximilian Gunter. So Gunter now 14th on the grid up to 9th. He's making a bit of progress. And Harrison Newey, number 17, up into 15th place, having started right at the very back, 19th, last on the grid. Pedro Piquet there, coming under attack. Marino Sato is the one behind him, and Sato, ex-Italian F4 racer, knows Monza, comes up on the outside as they head down towards the Roggia chicane. There's a lock-up by Harry Newey in the background. Up the escape road goes Sato. Where does he join back in? We'll see in a moment. And there he is. But lost a lot of time to Piquet, and Harry Newey is going to get past him as well. So Newey gets 1 place gain, 14th he becomes. All this hard work, and they're outside the points, all of these drivers. Joey Mawson down in 18th place, having had to serve that drive-through. And David Beckman, just to finish his story, in the other VAR car, remember we saw him in replay getting airborne. Well, he has pitted and has not rejoined, so I think that did enough damage to the floor of the car to render him out of the race, having already had to have an engine change. So it's not been a good weekend for David Beckman. It's not been a good season, actually. The promise he displayed at Lucca last year, the team absent from the championship this season, not being replicated. Ralph Aaron under attack. Nikita Mazepin to the outside line as they head into the Parabolica side by side. Not quite. Ralph Aaron able to power his way out the other side. Up towards the timing line they come. The leaders go by, and the gap now Daruvala to Norris is 0.9 of a second. Another new fastest lap of the race to Lando Norris. That's Islet on the outside. Dennis on the inside of the blue car, who locks up and gets it slowed down so that Callum Islet's not impeded or not clobbered either. And Callum Islet is ahead now, up into 5th. But here comes Jake Dennis back on his toes to the outside line. Side by side they run up towards the Curva Grande. There is Mick Schumacher behind them as well. Prema versus Carlin. Jake Dennis on the outside all the way through the Curva Grande. He'll have the inside line for the Variante della Roggia on the inside if he breaks as late as he absolutely dares, which he does. Jake Dennis goes back through and retakes 5th place. More battles. Mazepin there through ahead for 11th with Jake Hughes behind him. 11 minutes of the race to go. Jake Dennis still under attack from Callum Island. Everywhere you look, virtually, there's a battle going on. And so it is true also for the race lead. They're getting closer and closer. Lando Norris nearly on the tail of Daruvala now. He's brought it down by 3/10 in the first sector. You're looking at what's going on for 5th. Dennis, Island, Schumacher, Zhao. But as I say, it won't be long before that lead battle is well and truly alive once more. There they are, absolutely together. Jehan Daruvala versus Lando Norris as they turn their way through the Parabolica. This is the end of lap 13, 10 minutes plus 1 lap of racing to go. Now Daruvala is going to have to work hard to fend off Lando Norris, to break the toe. They've come over the timing line. 13 laps are in the book and half a second is the margin between the two of them. Joel Eriksson, 3rd, also lapping quicker than the race leader, and Norris, with the benefit of a toe, is right there at the end of the pit straight, ready to have a look at the inside. Jehan Daruvala has led for effectively 20-plus minutes. Is he going to lose out towards the end of the race? It is absolutely conceivable now, because Lando Norris is right there, waiting to strike. He's not under any attack from behind either. Joel Eriksson is 4 seconds adrift, so he can concentrate on attacking. He doesn't have to think about defending, unlike Jake Dennis, who is having to defend 5th. From a really feisty Callum Islet. There are the race leaders. It's game on. Jehan Daruvala versus Lando Norris. They turn their way now up through the Lesmo curves. Norris goes just a little bit wider. But Daruvala up front. Now, is he going to be able to repel the challenge of Lando Norris? The clock ticks down. When it hits 0, there's another lap still to run. Into the Variante Ascari. If those two got themselves together and started squabbling, would that enable Joel Eriksson to close? Possibly. His sector's not as good in Sector 1, but he's a little bit quicker in Sector 2, actually. So Joel Eriksson there in the background, bringing Ferdinand Habsburg with him, is not out of the equation entirely. He might not be able to get onto the back of the leading two, but he's giving it a red-hot go, that's for sure. Down to the Parabolica they come. Ferdinand Habsburg having his best showing in Formula 3 without question. Turns his way there through the Parabolica. Up towards the timing line. There are the two race leaders. The gap widens just a little, half a second last time. It's 4/10 this time around, but it's going to come down into the braking zone for the Rettifilio chicane. It had opened up relative to the Parabolica as they came over the line, but there, under attack, Callum Islet's got the place, 5th off Jake Dennis. Jake comes back at him on the outside and retakes it, dives into the chicane, goes a little bit wide. The Prema trio all bottles up behind him, but Jake Dennis hangs on to his 5th place. Callum Islet 1 up, 1 down. He cannot make progress because every time he gets a place, he seems to lose it again. And now he's under attack from Mick Schumacher, who come up on the outside line all the way now through the Curva Grande. Guan Yu Zhao looking for track space as well behind them all. Schumacher on the inside, goes through, makes the move, and Mick Schumacher now gets himself into the top 6. Callum Islet having to defend. Many people's tip for the title this year, but he's falling back in the pack now. And with each place he loses, it is points being lost as well. And Lando Norris working his way up the order. Coming into this race in terms of points, Joel Eriksson on 55, Callum Islet only 1 ahead of Lando Norris. So with Lando 2nd, Joel 3rd and Callum now 7th, it's going to be a bit of a shuffle around post-race. There is Jake Dennis then, running 5th, but now Mick Schumacher coming up behind him. Mick Schumacher started 9th on the grid, so he's chipped his way up the order. Replay there on the inside, number 11 is Tadasuke Makino, almost getting it together with Kevin Suri. The race leaders come through with 6 3/4 minutes still to go. Over the timing line, Race leader, Daruvala, 3/10 up on Lando Norris, who gets a toe. He's closing. This for the race lead. Lando Norris to the inside. Is he going to be able to do it? He gets that the inside, job done as they turn into the chicane. Lando Norris goes through. Worked it perfectly. Good run off the Parabolica, got in the slipstream, was towed along, makes the move. Now Daruvala is the man in the slipstream. He could fight back, he will fight back. He's alongside out of the Curva Grande, together for the race lead. Who says you can't overtake in Formula 3? Side by side, inside for Norris, outside for Daruvala. Lando Norris stays ahead. He's still there, but can he get away? Jehan Daruvala doing his best to stay on the back, to stay within the slipstream. And then behind them is Joel Eriksson, who has got Ferdinand Habsburg tucked up behind him. Does the gap widen at the second Lesmo? Yes, it does. Has Lando Norris made a break? Daruvala needs, as best he can, to close again on the run down towards the next chicane. PK here gets himself up past 33, which is Marino Sato. That's the fight for 13th place. PK goes defensive. Sato goes one side and then the other. They're being caught by Kevin Suri, and then also number 11, Tadasuki Makino, is next in that queue as they work their way down towards the Variante Ascari for the 16th time in this queue. There is now Guanyu Zhao, who's managed to work his way through all the Prema traffic by the look of it, because 8 is Zhao, behind him is Dennis, then Schumacher, then Eilert, and then Günther. So Guanyu Zhao, all of a sudden, is the big mover in the pack. Mick Schumacher to the inside line to get up alongside the blue car of Jake Dennis. Jake on the outside, runs wide. Mick Schumacher will be on the inside, but he can't get level. He slots back in behind and now tries to pull out again, conscious that Callum Eilert is right there behind as well. Over the timing line they come. Eilert goes one side of Dennis. Schumacher is on the inside line. It's 3 wide as they funnel their way down toward the Rettifilio. Jake Dennis tries to defend from Schumacher. In so doing, Callum Eilert comes up on the outside. Schumacher slots back in behind them. Dennis claims the place. Eilert goes over the curb. He's going to have to let Jake Dennis go and then slot in behind him and defend from Schumacher. There are the leaders. Lando Norris ahead of Jehan Daruvala. And Daruvala has just done a personal best in the first sector. He has not given up. And off the road in the background goes Joel Eriksson. Eriksson up the escape road, and so Ferdinand Habsburg could well be on for a podium. Zhao versus Dennis. Behind it Schumacher, then Eilert, then Günther. And the next driver being warned about track limits is number 1, Joel Eriksson, as the leading cars work now. Lap 17, PK versus Sato, who goes up the escape road. Number 33, Marino Sato. And who comes out of that best? Well, number 11 also trying to make progress is Tadasuki Makino. Around the outside, Kevin Suri. He slots second in that battle pack. PK sticking out his elbows. Harrison Newey still frustrated at the back, cannot work his way through, and that's surprising given the benefits of a slipstream round here. Makes you think that all is still not quite right with that car. So Lando Norris, race leader, will work his way in a moment up towards the timing line. Ferdinand Habsburg is third, so he's on for a podium here, the Austrian driver. Assuming, that is, that Joel Eriksson, the championship leader coming into this 4th round, can't go back past him. The leaders go through. It's 0.6 of a second. Is Daruvala close enough to benefit from the toe and close down towards the Rettifilio? Well, he does close a little, but not enough to think about making a move. So Lando Norris comes out ahead as there Mick Schumacher on the inside. Fends off Jake Dennis. They go down towards the chicane together. Behind them, Eilert defends from Maximilian Günther. Schumacher defends from Dennis. Ralph Aaron is trying to defend from Nikita Mazepin next in the queue as well. And Jake Dennis, possibly with contact, goes up the escape road. Threads his way through the barriers. Rejoins, and was there a little nudge? Yes, and it was Günther that got into the back of him. So number 3, Maximilian Günther, was the aggressor. There are the 2 race leaders. 2 minutes and change on the clock, plus a lap. So I reckon they've got this, 1 more in the time, and then the regulation lap at the end. Callum Eilert losing out again, because now Nikita Mazepin gets up past him and a really cross Jake Dennis, flinging the car sideways out of the Rogia chicane. Tries to attack Callum Eilert. It makes you think that all is not 100% with Callum's car, because he's faded as the race wore on. Remember, he was 4th earlier, but Lando Norris has worked his way up into the race lead, and now he's trying to build that. It was 0.6 of a second last time. Behind him, Jehan Daruvala, and the gap has opened up a little. In 3rd place, it is Ferdinand Habsburg as they work their way down into the Parabolica. Habsburg doing his best to keep Eriksson at bay. the next pair there, number 34, that's Jake Hughes. And the quick Brit, accelerating his way down towards the Parabolica now. Jake, at the start of the lap, was in 12th spot, so out of the points, frustratingly. We are not done yet, though. He could find himself better up the order come the end. Joey Mawson, by the way, despite having to serve his drive-through, has got himself up past Harry Newey for penultimate place. And is there a car with a problem? Is that Jake Dennis heading for the pit lane? I fear it is, as the cars work their way third and fourth now, down through the chicane. Habsburg ahead of Ericsson. And Jake Dennis does pit, so potentially with damage after that contact at the chicane. He's out of this race. 2 more tomorrow still to come, but another qualifying session at the end of the day. There are the race leaders. So at the end of this lap, they will hit the end of time for the race and have that one regulation lap at the end. And Jehan Daruvala is staying on the back of Lando Norris. The British driver leads, but he's not escaped. He is still being given a real workover here as they run a little bit wide over the curb. Now, is Daruvala biding his time, as Jake Dennis has already bailed from the car? Is Daruvala content to sit there and on the last lap push and make the bid? Otherwise, he'll be ahead, and he will be the one being slipstreamed by Lando Norris and could lose that lead. Perhaps it's one of those races where you don't want to lead on to the last lap. We'll see. This is Piquet versus Suri, brushing into the chicane, and Pedro Piquet, who's had a spin here already, ends up going up the escape road, and I think Suri follows suit after that contact. Not deliberate, but the two of them going for the same piece of road. Lando Norris continues to lead, and he's about to start the last lap. Both he and Daruvala go wide. Jehan has got to get himself now close enough to attack down to the first chicane, and it looks like the gap has widened too much. It was half a second. They come through now. It's still hovering around the half a second mark, and Piquet with damage is out of the race. That's coming out of the Variante Ascari, I would suggest. It'll be a yellow flag zone, and the two leaders go into the first chicane together, but really that was potentially the best chance for Daruvala, and he couldn't take it. For third, it's Habsburg here, ahead just of Joel Eriksson. The two of them make the run up towards the Curva Grande with the blue car of Ferdinand Zvonimir, Maria Valhurst, Keith Michael, Otto Antal Bahan, Leonard von Habsburg, to give him his full title, hanging onto the place. The race leaders work their way out of the Variante della Roggia, into which goes Ferdinand Habsburg and Joel Eriksson. So these two pairs still squabble as they work the Lesmo Benz. Lando Norris is the one that goes a little bit wide there. Does that give an advantage back to Jehan Daruvala? Not much of one. The gap was half a second, 0.524 coming onto this lap. Wide in the background goes Eriksson. Daruvala inching up onto the back of Lando Norris as they sprint down towards the Variante Ascari. More strife for Ralph Aaron, as right into the back of him goes Nikita Mazepin, and that spears Aaron up the escape road. Race leaders with effectively one corner to go now. There is this straight, the Parabolica, and the run to the timing line. Daruvala is not close enough, I fear. He's doing his best. Lando Norris moving from one side to the other to try and break the toe, negate the effect of the slipstream. If Daruvala was really brave through the corner, he might just get the run up towards the timing line. Ferdinand Habsburg is still third, and Daruvala spoils the run by going too wide, and so Lando Norris is going to come through to score his second win of the year. Lando Norris, the British driver, scores victory at Monza. Second is Jehan Daruvala, and third is Ferdinand Habsburg, his best Formula 3 result in the Carlin car. It's a 1-2-3 for Trevor Carlin's eponymous team. Fourth for Motorpark, Joel Eriksson. Fifth for Prema. Should be, it is Guan Yu Zhao ahead of his teammates Mick Schumacher, Maximilian Günther. Ralph Aaron hangs on to eighth, and then ninth as they come across the line should be Callum Island, and for 10th it's Jake Hughes, who gets himself in the points on the last lap with Nikita Mazepin in strife, as we saw up at the second chicane. What a cracking race. So much happening, lots of overtaking, lots of great racing, and none of the silliness that we had a couple of years ago. So as Carlin, understandably, as a team, begins its celebrations, it's Lando Norris that heads them home. The top three might all drive for the same team, but of course in this type of racing it's every man for yourself. Just don't drive into your teammate, but everybody has to bring their own budget, and therefore everyone wants the best result for them. But from a team point of view, a 1-2-3, an exceptional start to the weekend. Lando Norris, a winning margin of 0.6 of a second, and you can see they were battling right the way to the end. That was Callum Islet just ahead of Jake Hughes. And if you're wondering what that margin was, it was 28 thousandths of a second. So Jehan Daruvala, so near and yet so far. Started from pole, led the first, what, 2/3, maybe a bit more of the race. But in the end, denied, courtesy of Lando Norris. Ferdinand Habsburg, I think, will be delighted with that. It's a good qualifying yesterday and a very good run. Joel Eriksson frustrated, championship leader coming into the event, but losing points over the course of that first of 3 races here at Monza. To confirm the way they came over the line, Lando Norris, the race winner, ahead of Jehan Daruvala. Ferdinand Habsburg 3rd, Joel Eriksson 4th from Guan Yu Zhao, Mick Schumacher 6th, ahead of Maximilian Günther, 8th for Ralph Aaron, down to 9th Callum Eilert, 10th Jake Hughes. Out of the points, Nikita Mazepin ahead of Takasuki Makino, Marino Sato 13th, 14th Joey Mawson after his drive-through ahead of Kevin Sori. Pedro Piquet stopped. I think also Suri failed to get to the checkered flag. Harry Newey was a lap down. Jake Dennis retired, and so too did David Beckman. So the winning drivers make their way down the pit lane. The podium party will be made ready. The drivers will be whisked up to the presentation area very shortly. And a great way to start racing at Monza. See what I mean about the slipstream though, and how that helps the racing. And this is how the championship looks. It is 67 points each for Joel Eriksson and Lando Norris. Callum Eilert 3rd, same number of points as his teammate Maximilian Günther. Then it's Jake Dennis 5th, Jehan Daruvala is 6th from Guan Yu Zhao, Mick Schumacher, Jake Hughes comes next. So Norris and Eriksson, joint championship leaders going into qualifying this afternoon, and of course races 2 and 3 tomorrow. That's Jehan Daruvala being congratulated, and that's Lando Norris making sure that everybody at Carlin who's worked on his car is thanked for their efforts. Ferdinand Habsburg, also a very happy man. And if you're wondering why Mick Schumacher's car is in the background, it is because he is the 3rd rookie, because Lando Norris, Jehan Daruvala are the top 2, not just outright, but also of the rookie competition. Schumacher, the 3rd of the rookie drivers in race 1. And in replay, Lando Norris taking the checkered flag. The margin 0.649 of a second at flag fall, with Jehan Daruvala behind him. Ferdinand Habsburg fending off Joel Eriksson for 3rd and for a podium result. And Lando Norris, a very happy man, making his way then now up towards the race control building, then to the podium.
I was only good in the toe, man. I could just keep up with you in the toe. I could barely catch you. You caught me like 4 seconds. Until I went to the toe.
Yeah, you were doing really well.
When I'm like 2 seconds behind, it's when I caught you most. I kept doing 5 because I got caught so much.
Eavesdropping on the conversation, both drivers talking about the benefit of the toe, and how it was hard to catch, but then the toe helping. How they go to the scales, part of the regulation. Let's, while we wait for them to get to the podium, have a look at some of the highlights of round 4 of the FIA Formula 3 European Championship. And after all of that drama, Ferdinand Habsburg will take in a moment the 3rd step on the podium. 2nd will go to Jehan Daruvala, and the top step for Lando Norris.
Mate, I went quicker than in qualifying.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be good. I was doing 5, I thought you'd be alright. I'll be alright. But then you were catching me so much.
Lando Norris, the British driver, just had a shot for a moment.
It took a while for him to catch you.
Yeah, but you were 4 seconds behind.
Exactly, when I was 4, I wasn't catching that much.
On the first lap.
Drivers making sure they have the regulation patches on their overalls. And once the FIA championship officials are happy, then the drivers can be brought forward onto the podium. I think it's the orange Kufsteiler 24 decal that's required. The Carlin engineers already poised, ready to celebrate. And very shortly out will come the drivers for the overall podium. All busy talking about their races. Mick Schumacher is there as the third of the rookies. Britta McKenna, the media delegate there, is rounding up the drivers as Lando Norris, our first double winner of the championship, steps forward onto the Monza podium over the pit straight, and the diminutive British driver will be joined in a moment by Jehan Daruvala for second place, Ferdinand Habsburg for third, and what a result for, can't just say the winning team, the dominating team, Carlin, a 1-2-3 for the British squad. So Lando Norris receives the balls, the national anthem and the trophy for the winner, presented by Stefano Domenicali, the president of the FIA Single-Seater Commission. And for the winning team, it is Jean-Baptiste Pinton, the FIA Chief Administrative Officer, who hands over, well, not the winning team, because that's the wrong trophy, that's for the second place driver. But anyway, Jehan Daruvala is the man that's been given the team trophy. Now Stefano Domenicali says, you give that to him, and I'll give this to you. So now Jehan Daruvala gets a second place trophy, and Jean-Baptiste Pinton will return and give the third place trophy in a moment to Ferdinand Habsburg at the far end of the podium. Everybody gets together on the top step for the photographs. At their feet is the Henkel Trocken that will be sprayed liberally, I'm sure, in a moment. And the celebrations begin here at Monza. Lando Norris, it is, who wins race 1 of the weekend in the FIA Formula 3 European Championship. 2 more races to look forward to tomorrow here. And we'll see you tomorrow. For now, thanks for your company. From David Addison, bye-bye.